the security challenges facing the nation naturally feed into the state of the economy, which is our next port of call. Of course, if we've had so much insecurity over the last couple of years, two recessions would not come as a big surprise. High interest and inflation rates, declining productivity and purchasing power, high debt figures for all strata of government and even the private and informal economy all make for a dire situation for Nigeria at 62. We'll be looking at this and trying to profile ways forward both for this government and the government expected to succeed it next year. So in that case, I'm being joined in the studios here by three gentlemen, three economists of repute. Let me start, of course, with Mr. Bismarck Rewane, Chief Executive Officer of Financial Derivatives Company. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mr. Rewane, of course, is also a member of the Presidential Economic Team. On this side, we have Dr. Biodu Adedipe, Principal Partner, B. Adedipe and Associates. Thank you for your time. Thank you and welcome. And on the other side, of course, you do know that Mr. Alaje is one of our regulars on our various business platforms. Mr. Paul Alaje is Economist. Thank you so much. Welcome to the program. So let's look at this. I want to start off with Mr. Rewane. Set the stage for us. Where are we as of today? Is it really as dire as many people say it is?
You start off with the word dire. I
Yes.
don't think, but facts are facts. The reality is that Nigeria is 62 years old, and if Nigeria was a human being, the average life expectancy of a Nigerian is 55, so Nigeria would have expired, right? So one. Two, they say a fool at 40 is really
A fool
like
forever.
So I don't think that's the situation. But basically what we see are some good things and some not so great things. But basically, the slides will show you that Nigeria is behaving like a toddler at 62. And if you're a toddler at 62, then you need to do some things. The last thing you want to do is to start wearing diapers at 62. So where were we in 1960, 62 years ago? So 62 years ago, the life expectancy was actually 39 years. 36 years, actually. And the currency was 71 cents to $1.
Which meant our currency was stronger.
Yeah, 71 cents, 71 kobo
to
$1. Sorry, I use the word cents. The literacy rate was 55%. And the real GDP growth was 0.19. Fast forward 62 years later, Nigeria's growth is 2.91, which is good. The GDP per capita has gone from $92 a head to $2,293. But what $92 could buy in 1960, you can't even buy with if you adjust for inflation. Well, the reality is that let us compare ourselves. We're a colonial country that time. 1 naira was one. There was no naira. There was a pound, right. Nigerian pound. Population was 45 million. Now we're 216 million. Life expectancy, as I said, was 40 years. 39.9, now it's 55 years. Great. Now, but at that same time, we had other countries like us. China, for example, was very clear. China had a GDP size of $59 billion. We had $4 billion. The entire country had $4 billion. That was the GDP of Nigeria in 1960. Malaysia had $1.92 billion. Singapore had less than $1 billion. Go forward 62 years. Singapore, the income per head in Nigeria has gone from $93 to $2,225. China has gone from $90. The Chinese income per capita was $90, $90 for one person a year. It's now $10,000. Malaysia had $235. Malaysia has gone to $10,000. And Singapore, which had $428, now has $60,000. So compared to our peers, it's as if we just went, it's been lights out for Nigeria. Now, but there's some great things. Nigeria is the largest economy in Africa, but declining. 26th largest in the world. 4 of the 20 fastest growing cities in the world are in Nigeria, and they are Nnewi, Abuja, Uyo, and Port Harcourt. 5th largest agricultural output, $84 billion.
A number of people will be surprised that those fastest growing cities you mentioned did not include some usual suspects.
No. fastest growing doesn't mean they're a huge population, but
fastest growing, yeah.
Now, second largest producer of roots and tubers, yams, after China, 115 million tons a year. Fifth largest producer of vegetables in the world, 16.4 million tons. I say you need to check that out. Second largest producer of tomatoes in Africa, and 14th largest in the world. Sixth largest diaspora remittances back into the country, $24 billion. And seventh highest fertility rate in the world amongst our women. 17th lowest median age, 18.1. But it's been a story of missed opportunities. An infant giant. Oil boom turned oil curse. Nigeria has underperformed in every respect of almost every economic indicator due to structural defects, weak institutions, and compromised leaders. So, what next? The truth is that, the good news is that the economy, like the 4 different scenarios, will either regress completely, right? Conflict, we either implode, second option. 3, status quo, just muddle through.
Just keep.
And fourth option, which is you break through and become a great nation. The probability is that because we are pushed to the wall, we are likely, none of the 3 other options is a plausible scenario. So the chances are, and we hope, that we break through and make some progress, right? But there are 4 categories of Nigerians. There are rural survivors, and these are 38% of the population. The rural people, Greek and all of that, they are just survivors. They are barely above water. Then you have urban survivors, another 50%. So 88% of the people are survivors, just barely.
Managing to eke out a living.
Then there's a dwindling middle class, which is about 10%. And then there's sophisticated elites who use private jets and everything, 2%. So because of this income inequality, because of this opportunity inequality, because of this oppression of those who have as against those who do not have, and they say if you don't have, you can't get, and if you can't get, you can't have, right? So now it reflects itself in this next slide, which tells you that in the last year, the price of new yam has gone from 1,000 to 1,500, up 50%. A bag of rice, in spite of all the pyramids and all of that, has gone from 16,000 to 35,000 as of today. Okay? Of course, cooking gas has gone all the way to 10,500. Gari has gone from 6,500 to 15,000, up 130%. Cement has gone from 2,550 to 4,200. That's fair. And your rent has gone from 500,000, if you're in the middle, up to 1.2 million. So, well, next is the fact that you will have in 2023, 2024, the indicators seem to be looking green. In other words, real GDP is going to go from the current level to about 3.8% in 2024. Income per head will go slightly, marginally up to 2,330. Inflation, which is now at 20.54, is likely to decline to 13.8 next year and down to 12.3 the following year. The exchange rate, which is on its own 7.45 today, is likely to appreciate towards, hopefully, to about 6.80, 6.20 at that time because of policies that will be introduced. Life expectancy, 59 years, and your literacy rate will increase. So, why? New government, new administration, new people, new policies, new promises. Policies, promises. All candidates are pro-business, business-friendly policies, new direction, debt rescheduling is inevitable, and managed floating rate of the naira is almost inevitable. Privatization of state enterprises, and so open market economy, real GDP increase, naira will appreciate, increased investment flows, unemployment will likely reduce. So all things being equal, touch wood, better days ahead. Touch wood.
Touch wood. Now, I'm very happy. Thank you very much, Mr. Awane, for setting that. Now, to both Mr. Alaje and Dr. Adedikpe, let's look at what he said a bit. those who are coming, a lot of those I've spoken to, and I want two of you to take this. Those I've spoken to say that not only is it that they are not yet talking about the economy, beyond we'll create jobs, we'll build houses, we'll build roads, which everybody says, but that they don't seem to be aware of what they will be taking over. Someone pointed out to me yesterday that the head of service, either in annoyance or in a fit of, admitted that the federal government had been borrowing for quite a while to pay salaries. So that money is going down a hole because if it's a salary payment, it's not coming back. Okay? And that is responsible for the widening of the debt portfolio. And that's the federal government. You can imagine what's going on at the states. So I want you to take a look at what Mr. Iwani has said vis-a-vis what the incoming people who are now beginning to beat the drums of campaign will be faced with, and we hope that they will be listening as you speak. Let me start with you, Dr. Adedipe.
All right, thank you so very much, and happy Independence Anniversary, everybody. Now, that was a very, very encouraging scenario that Mr. Iwani painted. And of course, I align with those expectations because of the work I've been doing in that area as well. Now, one critical thing that I will expect the frontline contenders for that office to start with is a vision for the economy. And I'm looking at that not about the 10 or 4 years, but a vision that talks about what you want to make of this economy in the next 10 years, which means you must look beyond your own time in the office. And that vision also should be compelling enough for Nigerians to also understand it, which means it's not about casting the vision, but also communicating it well, so we know where you are going. That would be the starting point. So that also will look at what type of economy do we want? Is it going to be export-led growth we are going to pursue? Or are we looking inwards where we say, look, a bill of 1.889 trillion naira monthly, January to June this year, we want to work on that and see how we reduce that bill. Or you are looking at unemployment. What creative approach do you want to introduce? It's not enough to say, okay, in the next 10 years, we're going to create 100 million jobs and whatever. But specifics, how will that be done? So, and in such a way that the rest of us can relate with it.
Can measure it, can follow it.
Very important. Now, that then means that whatever you tell us you want to do and want to achieve, as you said earlier, promises, okay, they must be measurable. And that means we can hold you accountable. It also means that periodically you want to bring the scorecard to Nigerians, and then we can say, okay, we are on the right trajectory concerning what you promised us. That is what leadership is about. So I'm waiting to hear them say concrete things in that direction. Specifics. Now we know Nigeria today, like many other countries anyway, is facing currency crisis. There's also the crisis of inflation, which is global anyway. But I want to hear specifics. What will your own administration do about that if you come into office?
Mr. Raji, our own situation is different because what Dr. Adedipe has said now about, the global community, various countries faced with inflation and so on, we find that many of them are able to begin to tackle this because they have something which Nigeria is mostly not having, which is that we don't seem to have a productive base. We are not producing anything, and therefore we are left at the whims and caprices of the economic winds of demand and supply elsewhere. I mean, the war is on in Ukraine, so bread has become expensive in Nigeria, even though Nigeria is neither supporting Ukraine nor Russia and so on. But, we are already bearing the brunt. These are the things that people tell me. They can't buy Indomie anymore because the price of pasta has gone up because, you have that. Granite oil. And so these are the people at the base, what Mr. Iwani referred to as the rural or urban survivors. So, again, I ask you the question I asked Dr. Adedipe. So when people are now, telling you, vote for me next May, I will build roads and so on. How do I live till next May, to be able to begin to see some of these things?
Thank you so very much. Happy independence to all of us that are Nigerians. What is missing in our economy is faith. We all have lost faith in the economy. Many people graduated from Nigeria University, many doctors. You saw the numbers 2 years ago when the Medical Association in Nigeria were telling the Minister of Labor that more doctors are leaving Nigeria. And the minister said, well, that is good. You see, those that are leading us and those of us that are citizens must show example, especially our leaders. When you lose faith in something, you don't put your mind into it. And it shows by where you spend your money. Nigeria economy is struggling today because we really don't believe in it. And economists cannot lie. It will show by the numbers. Let's look at the numbers. Central Bank of Nigeria shared this year that we spent $40 billion to import both education and health. About $28 billion is what we spent on importing education. Meanwhile, average of $1 billion per annum is what we have spent to bring in health, that is to import health. These are things that in 1960, there was hope. We saw University Teaching Hospital in Ibadan. And we saw some things that leaders of those days were trying to put in place so that we will not continue to deplete our foreign exchange. But other than continuing in that process, we have seen military intervene, and now, should I say, civilian intervention. Because looking at the difference is really not there. If I ask today, let's sample opinion, and for that are watching us around the world that are Nigerians. If America say there is free visa, you can stay for 5 years, how many Nigerians will still remain in Nigeria? How many people will love to travel if we say visa is now free? So the man coming, I've seen 3 or 4 or 5 contenders. How will they restore faith in this nation that will make us proud that we are Nigeria? And faith can be measured. It's not religious faith. If I hold 1,000 naira today, how will I be guaranteed that what 1,000 naira we buy today, I will still be able to use it to buy the same thing tomorrow? Because Nigeria is being battered on 2 sides. One on inflation, over 20%, which means your 1,000 naira last year automatically is now less than 800 naira in terms of what it can buy. The second one, which is even worse, is exchange rates. By the way, each time we say we devalue, Central Bank of Nigeria had devalued the naira, on official rate. And what we saw, by February this year, I mean last year, was that 1 trillion naira was added to the debt profile of Nigeria. Exactly February, when the policy was made. And the meaning, we did not borrow any money. But because we now need more naira, because this economy is naira, to pay back the dollar. So the man coming must be able to explain in clear terms, what are you going to do to exchange rate? What would you do with subsidy? These are topics that politicians don't want to touch, but you must discuss it.
Yeah, but part of the reason why they don't want to touch is because, as one of them had told me, Nigerians don't want to hear.
Not that Nigerians don't want to hear.
Let me explain, because when you say it like this, there are people who have said it like that, and that is that, oh yeah, you want to talk about subsidy, you want to talk about removing some of these other bottlenecks and so on. But the minute you do so, there are reactions. The people shut down the country, shut down the economy. So what you are trying to solve, you haven't quite solved. But then you are now faced with additional challenges which are at the very beginning of what you are trying to solve. So, I mean, if you talk about, I know how much political kickback some of those you are mentioning got when they said, yes, we will look at that issue of removing the subsidy. They haven't actually said they will remove it. But quite a number of the reactions they got were that we are waiting.
Just look at our budget 2022 and remove 5 or 6 trillion that will be spent on subsidy out of that budget. And ask me, you understand what the minister said when she mentioned that what we generated in revenue in Q1, that's first quarter,
right,
was not sufficient to service debt. Okay. But we would spend about 5 to 6 or 7 trillion, depending on what the figure will be at the end of the year,
right,
and remove that from what has been budgeted for. And let us know, can that money truly help us in the path of growth in the real sense of it? So anyone coming must tell us, what exactly would you do? And not just what, How would you do what you claim? So we have the issue of subsidy. We also have some issues people don't want to talk about. But at the end of the day, they come back hurting us big time.
Mr. Rwade, you most recently, even as we speak now, you are able to see some of the political headwinds that people talk about when they talk about the economy as not being a simply economic matter. And that therefore, even though facts don't lie, the data supports a particular thing, but that there are always other considerations, including vested interests, which may or may not be the ones who put you in the position where you are the one making the decision in the first place, who will say, sorry, this you can't touch, that you can't touch. How do you go about that?
I think first and foremost, this is not a manifesto, a political platform. So I don't think we are here to talk about what the new president, because we're talking about 62 years of a country. Therefore, it also transcends many generations and many
yeah, but we're also looking at what are the things that are preventing us from being able to go this far.
There are bottlenecks, but the reality is that what are the solutions? And some of those solutions will go beyond today, tomorrow. And the reason why I painted a picture of cautious, very cautious optimism was that involuntary change in Nigeria has been more effective than voluntary change. Nigerians do things when they have to do it, not when they want to do it. Okay? So we are at the point now where we can no longer continue the way it is. All the parameters have shown that it is no longer sustainable or tenable. In other words, your debt problem, your multidimensional poverty, your lack of opportunity, the growing irrelevance of OPEC and the obsolescence of oil, and the fact that your oil production, the main oil production has become the fringe, and the fringe has become the main. That, in other words, oil theft is more than the oil production, right? So the lunatics have taken over the asylum, right? And that is exactly where we are. So what steps do we have to take immediately? One, you've got to accept the fact that the exchange rate has to be liberalized. Because in any case, everything that is being priced today, from tomatoes to oranges to yams and everything, it's being priced with that exchange rate in mind, because exchange rate, 76% of the inflation rate in Nigeria, causative factor comes from the exchange rate. So is it the exchange rate that is causing inflation, or is it inflation that is causing exchange rate? That's a different theory altogether. Now, so when you now know that, you have to do this. You have to reschedule and restructure your debt profile, because once you push out the debt, principal and interest payments over a longer period and refinance them with more expensive, you will have some breathing room to invest in productive and increase total factor productivity and labor productivity. When you do those things, and before you can do any rescheduling, you have to agree terms with your creditors. And those terms are not going to be easy. Nobody's going to give you money. You can't go. Some people went to New York recently talking about debt forgiveness, but all of them went in private jets. And they went in private jets and Rolls Royce. You don't go there to your creditors to show ostentatious, luxurious living. You go there humbled because you have learned from the fact that he who goes a borrowing will end up going a sorrowing. So that is the situation. So what do we do now? Reschedule the debt, address the productive sector, and this thing, the commodity that is in shortest supply in this country today is sincerity. Nobody is sincere. People say what they don't believe and want everybody to believe them. They themselves do not believe it. So policymakers, politicians are all compromised, totally and completely compromised. And once that has been determined and understood by the markets, then you have a crisis of confidence. What you have today on your currency and everything is a crisis of confidence. So what do we do? Now, there are some little shoots of excellence. And I'll take Edo State, for example. Edo State is investing significant amount of money on tourism. This is a new dimension. Tourism does not thrive in where there's insecurity, but you've got to come against it brutally and frontally. So if you do that and raise the bar, medical tourism, things that are happening, importing the doctors to do telemedicine and all of that, those things can actually shift the Burna Boy, Wizkid, and others, those diaspora flows. Because diaspora flows and what is coming from Nollywood and others is being what has kept this currency afloat. Now that with all your restrictions, those monies are being diverted, you can now see it in a completely misaligned currency. And that misaligned currency is causing inflation. And inflation is legislation, taxation without legislation. So we have to be very specific. Reschedule the debt, invest in those other areas, right? And be sincere, be truthful. We have spent half of our time and all our resources lying to ourselves and lying to the people, period.
Now, Dr. Didigbe, when Mr. Iwane was talking, it occurs to me that a lot of the decisions that are to be made, even on the basis of the things that he's talked about, reschedule the debt, tackle, some of the themes that have thrown our currency out of gear, and so on. All of this would require some painful decision-making. Yeah. They will require some painful decision-making. And if you look internationally, most countries don't do that except they are faced with no choice, which is why he talked about being at the wall, at the wall. Now, in your own thinking, in addition to what he has said, if we are to break it even further down, because it's not only those at the national level, although I mean they are probably the most important, but at other levels, what is the situation?
Right. Thank you so very much for that. Now, when you come to subnational level, we have a bigger problem on our hands. Because number one, most of them don't plan, and then the commitment to doing what is right for the economy at the subnational level is lacking. So for me then, the tone is set at the top. And the way I see this is, I always ask this question, what needs to change? I'm not so much so to the idea of, remove subsidy. It doesn't work that way anywhere, okay? Conceptually, there's nothing wrong with subsidy. But where the problem lies is when you subsidize consumption rather than production. And that is where we need to be pragmatic. Now, if you look at what is happening in Europe as we speak, many governments in Europe are introducing subsidy, okay? But the subsidy is going in the form of tax rebates to the energy producers and suppliers. So in which case, the effect of that subsidy on price is working through the production system and not going to the consumer directly. So it is still there, but the way it is managed and then the direction is key. That's one. Now, secondly, this issue of currency, because the reality is that whatever happens to the Naira exchange value affects everything, okay? And I will bring three things into this conversation. Some 35 years ago, I was in a conversation, and the argument was that should the Naira be floated, should we also consider banning some imports? And then, of course, I recollect vividly the position of the World Bank then was that Nigeria should not ban the importation of any item, but we can put a tariff as high as 500%. And I replied then that a tariff of 500% will make whatever you import so expensive, and I guarantee you, by the attitude of the regular Nigerian, he will still buy it. If only to show that he can afford it.
And he's different from everybody else.
You can't afford it. He will buy it.
It's not fair.
So, and I used three examples then. And I asked the question, what has Nigeria to do with importing safety matches, toothpicks, and walking sticks? I used those three examples 35 years ago. Now, 20 years ago, that was November 2002, what Mr. Iwane said came up at the Central Bank's Monetary Policy Conference. I was given a paper to deliver, and that is looking at the macroeconomic prices, exchange rate, inflation rate, interest rate. Which one should Central Bank focus on? That connects to what Mr. Iwane said. My thesis then was that everything that happens in Nigeria takes a cue from the exchange value of the Naira. The moment Naira loses value, it washes through the price of every commodity. And invariably also, it puts pressure on the central bank in terms of interest rate, management. So, and I said, for that reason, the central bank should give more attention to exchange rate management. So how do we do that? Now, I will also say this. I dressed like this deliberately today. My first choice was to be in suit and tie. But I said, how do I get a message across to Nigerians that where the problem starts with is us, not even the government? And what I mean there simply is this. The average Nigerian has a penchant for imported materials. Because this is a kind of psyche that whatever is imported is superior in quality. That needs to change. We must deliberately begin to consume what is made in Nigeria. And that means those three legs of economic activities: production, consumption, exchange. We must deliberately, from this point on, now focus on those.
Mr. Alaje, what Dr. Adidipe and Mr. Iwane have pointed out are things that we have wrestled with. At the point, it was FDI that was on everybody's lips, foreign direct investment. And in the course of that foreign direct investment, we had things like portfolio investors. And I remember a young person asking me, what is a portfolio investor? And I don't know if it was correct to be that simplistic to say it's someone with a portfolio. Who comes in, invests, and once there's trouble, they are out with their portfolio. They don't keep anything on ground that they, So again, does that then give us the situation where perhaps we were targeting the wrong things, which is the debate about what Mr. Iwane pointed out and what Dr. Adidipe has just pointed out, that we were going after the wrong things, and that even now, except that in a conversation like this, some of those things are coming up that we're still not completely sure about what it is that we should be going after.
Well, in the game of football, just before we came here, Mr. Iwane was sharing with us that Arsenal is now topping the table, right, where we were earlier. Nigeria is not using best 11 to manage our economy. We don't have our best 11. And you see, it is what people say, hearsay, what we feel. We are running an economy of impression. This is what we feel should happen. At the end of the day, we will see the numbers, and numbers don't lie. You can ask people. Hunger is a reality. Poverty is a reality. Unemployment is a reality. Inflation is a reality. Devaluation is a reality. People, those who we have entrusted with our livelihood, because nationhood, that means you are living there. It's part of your life. Whatever happens to inflation in Nigeria will affect you, it will affect me. Those that are managing it, that we have surrendered our life, economic life to, our security to, I doubt if it really matters to them. And I will tell you why. When you look at what Naira was, 2014, we were all complaining. What is Naira today? In fact, the gap between official rate and parallel market rate is larger than what it was in 2014. Not that the gap, to be charitable, let's say 430 at official rate, and parallel market rate, let's say 710 or so. 745. Let's say 730. The gap alone is 300. It wasn't 300 in 2014. So, is there really subsidy? What are we subsidizing? Let me explain. If we say that we are subsidizing by 200 naira, for instance, and we are buying at one, it depends on the state, because it's now depending on geopolitical zone. Say we are buying at 190 plus 300. If Naira were to be what it was in 2014, would we say there is subsidy? The answer is no. Because Naira has been so devalued, it has been so emaciated. Meanwhile, people are still earning 30,000 naira. And that is why you see the anger. You see the complaint. You see people talking to you. Things were not what they used to be. Because those that run the economy want quick fixes. And you have heard from Mr. Rwani, you have heard from Doctor. It's not going to be what you do overnight. But the journey of 1,000 miles starts with a vision.
One step.
It starts with one step. The journey of 1,000 miles. What we are not seeing is that step forward, is step backward. The former central bank governor said, we have retrogressed back into many years, what we used to be. Things that were available on our tables in the 80s suddenly have disappeared. The teas, the bread, the size of bread, the kind of life we want to live. But because economic matters, and you cannot lie about it, we can say sweet words, we can campaign and say, the question is, how would you do it? I did an article a number of years ago, especially about import. Nigeria economy has jobs. The truth is that we generate millions of jobs. Unfortunately, the jobs don't stay with us. You know why? When you import, you take 3 decisions. The first decision you take, when you import your suit and my suit and his suit, and even the clothes he wears is imported. It's just that it's sewn in Nigeria.
Yeah, local content.
Even my own is sewn in Nigeria. So that he made it what we call traditional attire does not mean it's made in Nigeria. It's also imported. Yes. But when you import, you take 3 decisions. The first decision you take is that you will deplete your foreign reserve. Central bank will be in trouble. Me say, Emefiele cannot print dollar. And that is why we say that policymakers are not communicating. When we say they are not communicating, we don't mean they are not meeting somewhere in the boardroom, in one office. No. We are saying that fiscal authority, trade authority, and monetary authority, their results we are seeing are not aligning. And this is 62 years. The policy is still not aligning. If it aligns, I don't need to say it. We will see the results. So when you import, you deplete foreign reserve. The second thing is you collect your goods and you'll be happy. But you know the third? The third is the most important. You lose jobs. You give job away to that country. So each time we import, we are telling somebody producing in China, in India, keep your job. We are telling potential job in Nigeria, we are stripping you of the job, that you don't have right to the job. So whatever we import, and you can look at it from our shoes, for women with wig, our human hair that is imported, from lipstick, from clothes, from anything we have. People watching us in their homes, the television they are using to watch us, is it made in Nigeria or imported? The air condition, is it made in Nigeria or imported? The chairs, whatever you have around you, how many can we say we have made in Nigeria? I'm not saying we can make everything in Nigeria, by the way, but I'm saying that there is the competitive cost advantage. We should look at it. We make oil. The least of the advantages should be for us to refine the oil locally. But unfortunately, 50 to 80% of the oil has gone under the ground in the name of oil theft.
Look, Mr. Rwani, so that brings, I'm sorry, that what he said now just brings me back to you. Yes. In the sense that he alluded to the one that, okay, we don't even have to struggle to do, which is the oil.
Yes.
Okay, so, but even the value addition, all the countries you mentioned that you compared Nigeria to from 1960 to now, incidentally, Malaysia, Singapore, China, okay, who were, some were even less than Nigeria, others were comparable.
They're refining.
Yes, but today, the Malaysian example, people talk about palm oil and what happened with Nigeria and the issue of palm oil. Yeah. So again, it comes back to what you were referring to or what you were talking about earlier, which is that nobody is going to do it at once. No one administration is going to be able to do it, even assuming they decide that they should do it. In which case, there's need for a plan. Yes. But I also remember that we had Vision 2020, okay, which was the most famous one at the time. And at the time when Vision 2020 was on, it seemed as if 2020 was so far away. Yeah. But 2020 is now 2 years behind us. Yeah. Okay, so again, it comes back to the issue of how are we processing these various things. I know that you and Dr. Adedipe and probably Mr. Laji had a role in Vision 2020, maybe not the implementation, but at least in the conceptualization of the document.
Again, it's those are unmeetable targets. You just set a target knowing that you're not going to be there to answer it. So, quite frankly, the day a plan is finished, it's already obsolete, right? So, but you have, and nobody even refers to the plan to see how far away we are not. So, again, it's like if you have a school without exams, you know what will happen to the children. So you must have measures to do that. But I think that the point has to be made very clearly that we talked about Nigeria. Nigeria is not a Robinson Crusoe economy. We go across exactly what's happening here, happening in Ivory Coast, happening in Ghana, happening in South Africa and all of that. How do we compare to our peers? Are they banning things there and all of that? I think that's yesterday's thinking. What you have to worry about is how competitive are you? You know, what are the things you're going to produce that you have a competitive advantage or comparative advantage in terms of output and cost? So when you look at that and see where the African Continental Free Trade Agreement is going, where the rules of origin are going, how is Nigeria positioned? We talk about refining. Dangote has invested loads of money in refining, and in another year or so, we will be able to produce things. But let us take a look at what happened to fertilizers. October last year, fertilizer was 5,000 naira a bag in this country. Dangote's fertilizers came on board, 3 million extra tons. What is the price of fertilizer, a bag of fertilizer today? 17,000 naira. And what's happening? The guys are buying the fertilizers and carrying it across the border. Because they are rational economic agents. They know that by selling it across the border, they will get safer and bring the money here and buy things. So to the extent that money is fungible, to the extent that every economic agent is rational and work in his own best interest. So once you make that assumption, and that the markets are efficient by nature, right? You can't fool around and say this exchange rate. No, the exchange rate is telling you a story. If you're not efficient in how you produce, you'll be punished. The British government just announced, you know what happened to the British pound? They were punished, screwed properly.
Yeah.
And they typified and caricatured as zombie economists, right? And what have they done? They've now decided, the reality is that if there's a crisis of confidence in your country, your currency, there's nothing you can do except you change your policies altogether. And I said it from the beginning, that is commodity that is scarce, most scarce in this country today, sincerity. There's a trust deficit. Nobody, even the people who are announcing policies, do not believe what they're announcing. And you can tell when somebody doesn't believe what he's saying, right? So, and that's the reality. Now we've been caught. We are where we are. I don't care what you do. Until you make a fundamental change, nothing will happen. Confidence will not come back. Nobody is going to believe you until you are sincere to yourself. Having said that, that's where I starting point. Go to your creditors, get a rescheduling. Be sincere to yourself and say, you are living above your means. So cut it back. Go to the state governments where you said there's a huge lack of capacity, where state government officials are intent in sabotaging even the state projects. Yeah. There's no capacity there. Remember when doing the minimum wage here, how much is your salary? Nobody could come up in the states to say what it is. And if we did not increase VAT at that time, we wouldn't have been where we are. And now, when we did minimum wage in 2019, it was supposed to be $90 a month. Today, it's what, only about $40. And then you can barely buy a pair of shoes with the minimum wage right today.
Minimum wage, you can.
So, reality is that you've got to preserve value. Coming back to the oil sector, which is where, and I come from that neck of the wood, you can't, let me use a simple example. The pipelines are about 293 kilometers or so, and loads and loads. You can't break into a pipeline just like with a chisel or something. It's a very comprehensive, elaborate process. Then to actually suck the oil out, you have to seal it off. You need flow pumps to pump it into barges. Those barges have to go all the way to a mothership, and those motherships have to go all the way to so these are not jerrycan business. These are very sophisticated things. And when you are doing 100, 200, 300,000 barrels a day, God, I can tell you for sure, those things are not happening under darkness. There's a complete connivance, conspiracy going on. So let's not deceive ourselves. As long as you lie to yourself and people know you are lying to yourself, nobody will believe you. And therefore, the crisis of confidence starts. There will be no confidence in what you say. Oh, we are dealing with things with oil. We are doing this about the exchange rate. We are doing this about interest rates. We are doing this about subsidy. We are doing this about ASU and NANS, and nobody believes you because you've got to start by believing what you are saying yourself to the public. That is what it is.
It's the way it comes across to me as a way of winding this up is that you talk about sincerity.
Yeah.
You talk about consistency over time. You talk about taking the painful decisions, looking at the global picture. And whether or not we are now prepared, as Mr. Arewani said, since we are now at the wall, whether we are now prepared to confront our reality, because we've been living apparently in some kind of wonderland for quite a while. But economically, it's going to be tough going ahead. And that's what this conversation for me has highlighted. So let me thank Dr. Biodun Adedipe, Mr. Paul Alaje, and Mr. Ruane for your time this evening. When I started and I said it's a dire situation, Mr. Ruane shook his head. But I think that's what this conversation has eventually brought to light, that it is a dire situation. But thank you, gentlemen.